He's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with 27 years of experience. Together, he and I are the Brief Brothers. We love talking about creative briefs, briefing, and advertising. We're back for another episode, Henry. Today, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of something we've never done before. We're going to watch a spot for Amazon that we both think is pretty cool. But instead of reviewing it, we're going to use it as an exercise that I use in my workshops, and I think you've done it in your training as well. We're going to deconstruct it. We're going to reverse engineer this spot to figure out the creative brief. And we're going to try to answer 5 key questions. Those questions are, what is the problem that Amazon is trying to solve with this communication? What's the objective, or why are they advertising? Who are they talking to? What is the single most compelling idea or the single-minded proposition? And if we can we figure out an insight? Now, we're going to show the spot in just a sec, but we've agreed as we were kind of prepping for our episode that this is an exercise that has a couple of limitations. One is we obviously don't know all the details that Amazon does. We also don't know what the agency that works for Amazon, and as I recall, it's
Wyden and Kennedy.
It's Wyden and Kennedy? Oh,
This spot is Wyden and Kennedy.
Okay. So we don't know what the agency knows. We don't know what Amazon knows. And we also just don't have a history of where does this spot fall into, other spots that they're doing. But that doesn't prevent us from doing this as a great exercise, as a thinking exercise, because it's how we go about answering these questions that we're going to work on. Plus, we also have to remember that, Henry, you've got 1 or 2 years of experience as a strategist. So we're going to pick your brain. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. I've got some thoughts too, but I think this is a great opportunity to do something we've never done before.
Yeah, I think we're going to take some guesses, but they're educated guesses, but based on experience.
So why don't we take a sec here? I think it's a 1-minute spot. Let's watch this spot for Amazon.
This don't taste all right.
Henry. So let's start with the first question. But wait, before I do that, let me just ask you, I've listed these 5 questions. Do you as a brief writer start at the beginning? Do you jump ahead to a question that you prefer to ask? How do you usually, what would you do here?
I don't have a formula. So it depends. Sometimes I start right with a single-minded proposition because I know where I want to go. And then I start building the brief around that. Sometimes I start at the top with the basic questions of what are we trying to do? What can communications help us? How can communications help us to do that, etc. So I don't have a formula. Sometimes, there'll be an insight that I know, and I know that a good single-minded proposition can come from that insight. So I start with that. So I don't really do it in order of the form. In this case, I think we're going in order. Well, let's go in order. Like what do we think here the business and then communication problem is that we're trying to solve.
So our first question is, what's the problem that Amazon is trying to solve with this communication? What is your take on that?
First, I just want to say, I think this is a really nice spot. I think the production value is really good. I think the casting, the acting is really good. And it tells a very kind of cool story about this security guard and his evolution through a new passion of cooking. And so the first thing that I noticed was that it's for Amazon Prime. It's not just for Amazon, it's for Amazon Prime, which is a subscription service that they offer. We see through the course of the spot various Amazon Prime offerings, streaming programming. We see books, we see cookware and things, stuff being sold. So somehow I think there was at least a desire to bring these disparate offerings into one communication for some reason. Now, what reason could that be? I think somehow this is about burnishing Amazon's favorability or brand affection, maybe as tracked through a brand tracker, right? Like you could imagine that maybe the marketing manager, the brand manager receives a quarterly report that shows that Amazon's favorability is decreasing over time, saying we need to increase that favorability because, or it could be a business metrics like new subscriptions are starting to plateau to Prime, or we have higher churn where more people are letting their subscription elapse than they had previously. So any of those could be like a business reason to want to create this commercial for Amazon Prime, the subscription service.
Well, let's pick one. Which one would you say? I mean, we all understand you can't address all three of those problems. I think they're astute observations. Which one do you want to choose?
I think they're trying to burnish their image. I think they're trying to move beyond a sensation or a feeling that maybe a lot of consumers have or are beginning to develop, that Amazon's just a place to get cheap stuff fast. Right. And that's kind of a pedestrian view of the brand, and they're trying to embellish that, make it feel more important in the lives of consumers.
So would you agree if I said the problem they're trying to address with this communication is to change the perception of Amazon as a brand?
Yes.
Okay.
And we sometimes talk about the from to exercise, right?
Right. Yes.
This could be from Amazon is a place I get, things that I need really fast and cheap, to Amazon is a place where I find valuable stuff that makes my life better or something like that.
I think maybe this next question will help us fine tune that, which is, what is the objective of the communication? I often ask, why are we communicating? Why are we advertising? What is the objective? And here, just as we addressed in the first one, I like to emphasize the importance of picking a good verb, because a verb communicates something to the creatives about what it is they should either do or how they should feel about it. So to build awareness, which tends to be a default answer that a non-thinking person gives to this question, doesn't communicate nearly as much as if you say to excite or to motivate or to educate. So how would you go about answering the question, why are we advertising? Why do we need to advertise?
So we talked about this a little bit as we were discussing what we were going to talk about today, and you brought up the word seduce, which is, I think, a really good word. It's a seductive word. What I felt like coming out of the communication was more inspired. So it could be inspire. I think that inspire people to look for the things that motivate them on Amazon, whatever. That I like the word inspire, but I agree with your premise that a good verb there. Now I'm gonna throw in a little anecdote. So I'm an Amazon Prime subscriber.
Me too.
And recently, in the last couple of months, I've really gotten into mixology, bartending, like cocktails, like classic cocktails, modern cocktails. And it turns out that a lot of the stuff, just like this chef would-be chef, a lot of the stuff you get on Amazon, the cocktail shaker, the cocktail recipe books. Some of them are classic books that are over 100 years old. A lot of the stuff is available on Amazon. So in a way, I really relate to the story in terms of, oh, I got this package and now I can do this thing. I can, I have the Hawthorne strainer and the fine mesh strainer, and I know the difference between them, and I'm learning how to use these tools. So I felt inspired by the spot. So I like that verb.
I agree with that. Does make a lot of sense. But the point is, and this is kind of an educational moment here, we want to inspire our viewers who we believe are either brief writers or people who work with briefs to think differently about how they go about answering those questions. So verbs are really important. So think carefully about which verbs you choose, because it communicates something different. And whether it's inspire or to seduce, they're both powerful. Okay, so we can say that the objective is to inspire people to maybe think differently about Amazon.
Yes.
So if we're going to say to change the perception about Amazon as being more than just a place to get cheap stuff, we want to inspire them to think differently. So they're connected, but they're different. All right.
Correct.
So this one you and I have talked about writing out the description of who the audience is, who we're talking to, and how deceptively difficult this can be, because a lot of people fall back on personas, and you and I have agreed that personas can be a collection of tidbits of information that don't add up to anything. They aren't really a person. They're just factoids. So as a first pass, how would you describe who we're talking to in this spot?
In this particular case, it's also tough because this is a mass brand, right, with appeal to a lot of different types of people, right? I don't think there's any archetype of the Amazon Prime subscriber. It's not like an early Tesla buyer who you could qualify as an early adopters into tech gadgetry, tend to be male, you have kind of this is a mass brand. We're talking about tens, if not hundreds of millions of people in the country. So what I'm looking at is the creative to try to figure out who they're going after psychologically, like who are they trying to appeal to? And one of the tricks that strategists use is we give like a nickname to this people. And, we're doing this on the fly, and we joked about like doing off the cuff. But if I was, as I was thinking about it, I would come up with something like eclectic enthusiasts, right? People that are enthusiastic about something, but it could be in a variety of fields, because Amazon isn't a single, like they don't just sell one thing. That in fact, one of the main things about Amazon is how widespread their footprint is in terms of the things that you can get through Amazon. So I would come up with something like that, and some sort of psychological description of somebody who's looking to get meaning out of life through the activities that they do, through probably a person who's an active learner, right? Like our guy in the commercial, he's somebody who's having personal growth. So I would create some narrative around that where I could, again, have the creators feel empathy towards this person who's, moving through life, trying to make their life better incrementally, has discovered a passion, is enthusiastic about it, is in the phase of wanting to learn about it, and is really excited and energized by it.
My thinking is that this character is a placeholder for a lot of people, which is, it seems like an ambitious thing to try to do, but I think if I'm right, and I don't know, but I think, because we talked about this before, this is a very aspirational communication. This guy goes from here to here. He's grown in the course of 1 minute to live out something that he's cared about, that is kind of a dream, and to the point where he maybe even changes profession. He sees the help one ad. So I'm wondering if that's a possibility. I know we've talked before about how dangerous it is to try to talk to everyone. And the best way to actually talk to everyone is to talk to one person. And if this guy maybe represents everybody in a broad sense, it's a guy rather than a woman. But it's still, he embraces and embodies this idea of aspiration.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think that what we're seeing here is an example of the fallacy of some clients when you try to give them a target description that they feel, oh, that doesn't include everybody that I wanted to include. The truth is that the target, you don't have to be a black middle-aged security guard to relate to this story, right? Like
No,
you
not at
watch
all.
you watch the movie and you're immediately on his side, like you. And so, and in each of us, it might trigger a different reaction. And in my case, like I said, I drew the parallel to my own life and mixology and the fun that I'm having with that, learning about cocktails, making them, the trial and error, by the way, of, you know, oh, that I tried to do something, it didn't work out, I'm going to tweak it. Oh, now that really worked. So I think it is the, but that's why I kind of reached for more than a demographic description or a gender description, to really say, by deciphering who this communication might appeal to is probably a good idea of who they were trying to appeal to. And I think that these are people that have interests in terms of, like I said, furthering their own kind of personal growth through activities, through learning new skills. You know, we live in a time, by the way, and this could be part of the target description. We live in a time where we have all of these tools for self-help and for learning, right? Like we were also talking before we started recording about my 66 Dodge, and I solve a lot of my problems by finding YouTube videos about how to do this or how to do that. And we're living in a time where we have access to unprecedented amounts of knowledge and tools and things that take what was once a hidden knowledge and make it known to us. Like if you wanted to get into mixology before, sure, you could go to the bookstore and buy a book, and then you're like, well, where am I going to buy the cocktail shaker and this? And like now I'm like, oh, I want to get a tiki glass because I want to make this particular tiki cocktail. Amazon, boom, right there. You have a dozen tiki glasses to choose from.
Yeah, my bias, and we've talked about this before, my bias is when you write out the answer to this question, who are we talking to, is to write in first person. And then I borrow something that you've said that I quote a lot, and that is you try to just write the description in a way that it's like a costume that the creatives can put on and see the world through the eyes of the customer. So between those two visualization ideas, call them, I think we have a pretty good idea. We didn't actually give you an example of what the description was, but we've talked about who this person represents. So I think we've got a pretty good sense of how we would answer that question. Let's go on to the next one. You ready?
Yep.
You know, we've talked about the single-minded proposition before and how it can be a very intimidating question for brief writers, especially those who are not strategists like you, but who are marketers, who are tasked with the responsibility of writing a single-minded proposition. You said that sometimes that's the first thing that pops into your head, but that's because I think that's a muscle in your brain that's been very well honed. Did you have a first thought on what your single-minded proposition would be?
Yeah, I was thinking, and it's not completely copywritten or thought out, but you know, we talked a little bit about maybe the perception some people have, or the creeping perception that Amazon's a place for stuff. And stuff being kind of a commoditized, you know, it's those brown cardboard boxes full of stuff that show up at your door, and you're excited about it today and tomorrow it's garbage, right? And so they're trying to elevate a little. So I was in that mindset of taking that word and kind of turning it and saying, you know, something like Amazon Prime, get the stuff that gets you deeper into the stuff you're into, or some, and like I said, I hadn't fully, so like the stuff to get you deeper into the stuff you're into. So it's basically how these products get you into stuff, but not material stuff, but into the things, into the concepts, into the skills that you are into, your interests.
The copywriter in me kind of went instantly to the place where you can dream bigger, which, you know, as a first draft may not be a bad place to start.
Yep.
But again, another thing I think
like
we should emphasize here, and I say this all the time in my training, I'll bet you do too. we're talking about a very rough first draft, first pass. It's not going to be, it's not the finished brief. It's where we start.
You're supposed to dedicate a few hours to this document.
Exactly.
And so doing the headline exercise that you recommend in your book, right? Of like, start jotting down everything that comes to mind, in terms of headlining single-minded propositions. And you're going to find different word variations, different word choices, different synonyms. You're going to take the beginning of one and tack it onto the end of another. And you're going to scratch some out and say, no, that's too corny or that's too basic. And you're going to say, how, and that's part of the process, is refining.
I wish I still had some of my old notebooks. I had these big black blank page notebooks that I think artists used to sketch, but I used them for just doodling when I was sitting with my art director partner and concepting. But I'm a color, I get rid of stuff. So I got rid of those, but I would use them as a teaching tool if I had them today, because it's filled with the same line written over and over and over again.
With one word different.
One word, some new word, transposing words, and it was page after page. And often I would come right back to the one I started with, but sometimes I'd find something along the way. But that's the process. You have to do it that way.
That gets back to one of the first things we said on this podcast, also many 122 episodes ago, which is brief writing is writing.
Yep.
And therefore the skills that a writer has to evolve in terms of writing economically, writing in a memorable way, editing yourself, rewriting, those things apply here.
Exactly. So our last question was, is there enough information from this spot where we can kind of take a stab at what an insight might be? So you've had a chance to think about this. You've seen the spot because I know you like it. We both like it. What would you say might be a tidbit? I think your preferred word is what some interesting tidbit about this problem or this category or this audience that would help you get to an insight.
So totally off the cuff, I think that it would be something like, and you talked about dreaming bigger, right? I think there's something about there's a bigger you, or there's a bigger you inside everyone, or there's and so that the idea is then that the single-minded proposition, it shows how Amazon gets that out of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the security guard. He's just a security guard, but there was something bigger and greater. I think talking about like rewriting on the fly, greater, right? There's something greater. That man was something greater than a security guard. At the end, we see his greatness as he's progressing and growing. Not great in terms of like the guy's going to win a Michelin star, but great in terms of bigger, right? Like it's a more substantial person who has grown because of Amazon.
Yeah, I think this gets back to the whole idea of the aspirational qualities of the communication itself, and that's what they want to tap into. So, there's
untapped potential in all of us.
Untapped, yeah, exactly.
So I think, yeah.
So this, I think we both want to remind our viewers that this is an actual thought exercise that you can do every day. Now we've taken up, 15, 20 minutes to do this. You can do it. You, meaning the viewers, can do this. We are pummeled every day with something like 7,000 messages, and we tune 6,997 of them out. And we've talked about this before, about keeping your brain turned on for one more minute at the end of the day, looking at something, a billboard, a magazine ad, something that came across your social media, and look at it as a professional marketer or advertiser, and do this exercise. Even just one of the questions.
Ask yourself the question, who the hell are they talking to here?
Right.
What is the main message they're trying to communicate here? What possible business problem are they trying to solve? Like, these are simple questions, and it doesn't take more than 30 seconds to start your brain thinking about, oh, I get it. They're trying to do this, this, and this. And and sometimes, some commercials, there's an old joke of your strategy showing, right? Like if a commercial is too rote, right? If it's too see and say, it's very easy to kind of decipher like what they were going for. With a really good piece of creative, sometimes you have to peel back some of the layers, because there is the great acting and the great production, and you kind of get carried emotionally away, and you have to start analyzing intellectually. oh, they're doing this because they must want to communicate X.
Yes, but this is something we can all do. All of us in the profession can do every day. It'll hone our skills. It'll build our writing skills, and it'll pay off the next time we have to write a brief. Even if you're not writing the brief, but you're reading it or reviewing it. Great exercise.
Yep.
Good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
And he's Howard Eibach, and together we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time.
Bye-bye.